Okay, those new credit cards are being sent out to customers now. Maybe you've received one in the mail. The one thing you notice when you take it out of the envelope, it looks different. Joining us now, Jason Brewer from Communications and Advocacy of the Retail Industry Leaders Association. He joins us live this morning. We thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great, Norma.
Okay, great. So audience at home, you might be hearing a little feedback. That's me, my questioning. He's hearing that. Let's get started. So I have one of those chip cards, and just the other day I was at a retailer and I went to swipe the card and it was rejected by the machine. Instead, I had to insert my card into the machine. There's a slot, but I didn't have to use a PIN. So the reader used my chip, but it did not require me to enter a PIN. How ready are we for this technology in the United States?
Well, I guess the short answer is we're getting there. Unfortunately, we're about 10 years behind Europe and Canada in implementing this new system, and it's a welcome change. Retailers are spending over $8 billion upgrading those payment terminals like the one you just mentioned to accept those new chip cards. And so rather than swiping the card, you'll dip it in sort of into the bottom of the machine. And that chip that's in the card is what's going to make it harder for thieves and cyber criminals to hack into your account, to steal your data, and to create a counterfeit card. And so this is a step in the right direction in terms of protecting ourselves, both consumers and retailers, from these criminals that we've heard so much about over the last couple of years, who have been sort of incessantly hacking and stealing credit card information from consumers.
Retailers are doing what they can to be ready for this technology. A lot of the larger retailers already have these readers, these chip card readers. But banks are still somewhat lagging behind in terms of in preparation for this and issuing those special cards. Why do you think that is?
It's hard to say. Retailers, as I mentioned, are making quite an investment to accept these new cards. Roughly 1 in 6 cards have been replaced. So if you look in your wallet, there's a good chance you may have one of those new cards, but some of the cards that you do have may be the old swipe cards. I wouldn't panic. Those cards will be coming. You will be seeing them in the mail soon. But one of the other components of this that's important for retailers is the PIN, which you mentioned earlier. In Europe and in Canada, they use what's called a chip and PIN system. So it's that chip card, and when you enter it into the reader, you enter a 4-digit PIN, and it's sort of a second factor authentication. It's a second layer of security that makes it harder for a criminal, should they get your card, to commit a crime, to use your card for a fraudulent transaction. And in the United States, banks are moving to chip and signature. So when you complete your transaction, you're still going to sign rather than enter that 4-digit PIN. We think banks need to take a full step. So this is a half step in the right direction. It's a good first step, but we really think that if we want the same payment security that consumers enjoy in Europe and Canada, we need to move to chip and PIN. It makes for a much more secure transaction, and we know, based on what's happened in those countries over the last decade, that it's dramatically reduced fraud in those countries.
Okay, what you're looking at, viewers, right now is that the chip that we're talking about on top of your credit cards or your store cards. Again, don't panic if you don't get them, you're saying, right? Call your bank, see maybe when they're going to send them, but don't panic. You can still use your regular credit card.
Yeah, so the new machines still have a swipe component across the top. So if you've got one of the older cards, you can still use it, so I wouldn't panic. But if you don't have one in your wallet, it might not be a bad idea to call your bank and ask when to expect that new card. Because, again, it will protect consumers and make it harder for a criminal to counterfeit that card and to use it to commit fraud.
What about the transferring of liability now in terms of these retailers? If those retailers are not ready and don't have those chip card readers, and a person becomes the victim of identity theft, I'm hearing that some banks are saying, some credit card issuers are saying, we won't pay for the fraudulent purchases.
So the good news for the consumer is that this isn't going to be on them. The liability shift will occur where if you bring an old swipe card, for instance, into a Target, and Target has the new chip reader, and for some reason there is fraudulent activity on your account, because the bank has not issued you that new chip card, the bank will be liable for any sort of fraudulent transaction. And then the reverse is true if the retailer doesn't have the new machine and your bank has issued you a chip card. So if a bank has issued you a chip card and you go to use it and that retailer isn't ready, and for some reason there is fraud associated with that transaction, the retailer will then be responsible. The good news for consumers is they will not be liable in either instance. It's really between the banks and the retailers which system is more secure. And right now, large national retailers have invested billions of dollars. So you'll see at Walmart, at Target, at Best Buy, Home Depot, you'll see those new machines up and running.
They're up and running now. I've already seen them, Brian. So thank you so very much for explaining that to us. And again, folks, no need to panic. Call your bank and get it going. So thanks so much, Brian.
Thanks. Have a great day.
It's a changing world when it comes to credit cards.
Okay, just a few weeks ago, I had to do it for the first time. I was like, no, what do I do? What are you talking about?
It's a little strange. Yeah, and you're like, wait a minute, I got to put the card in the machine. Okay, I'll get it. It's not a big deal. Once you get the hang of it, it's super simple. And like you said, Canada and Europe have been doing this for well over a decade now. Yeah.
I'm scared of, maybe something happening to my credit card. Hannah exploring some scary things as well. The Haunted Forest at Powers Farm Market.
I'm scared already.
Don't go into the woods.
Oh, don't go down that way, Hannah.
No, don't say I'll be right back.